And our next speaker is Jose Gonzalez, Research and Development Coordinator of Icpna. Mr. Gonzalez has been committed to the teaching profession for over 20 years. His experience covers teaching EGP, EAP, and ESP at all levels. He has worked at highly renowned institutions in Lima, Peru, such as the Graduate School of Business, SAM, the School of International Relations and Negotiations, the Catholic University, Universidad del Pacífico, Universidad San Ignacio de Loyola, Kern International, and several others. Mr. Gonzalez is an honorary member of Peru TISO, where he served as a representative of the Multimedia Interest Section, Academic Secretary, Regional Director at RINA, and Teacher and Trainer and ELT Consultant. Mr. Gonzalez is a certified EFL teacher by the State University of New York at Buffalo and has postgraduate studies leading to a master's degree in TFL at the University of Reading, the United Kingdom. His areas of interest include oral proficiency assessment and program evaluation. In his presentation today and during the Ministry of Action Research, he will both address the essence of reasons, stages, and implications for conducting action research and examine why it has become such a popular and powerful tool in finding out what is going on in our classrooms. So please welcome Joe Gonzalez with a big hand.
Well, thank you very much. And testing. Can you hear me? Okay, now it's fine. Okay, that was quite some introduction. Okay. And I would like to thank you for being here. And before I begin, I'd like to tell you that it is my hope that you feel very comfortable in this talk and that you really have the freedom to express any concern that you may have. I know that this particular topic, okay, which I selected here, was selected based upon a special request made by Carmen Vega, okay, the academic director of Icpna, Ontario, because she thought that the chances to hear about research and how to go about it are not always as many as we would like to have. So, welcome to the talk today, and to begin with this, okay, I'd like you to spend a couple of minutes talking to the person next to you to think about some of the words that come to your mind when somebody mentions the word research, okay? Or when you, for example, read a magazine or an article and somebody mentions the term research. Okay, let's spend a couple of minutes. Please talk to the person next to you, okay? The words that come to your mind. Just raise your hand and let me know, okay, what has come to your mind or what you have talked about with the person next to you. Any volunteers? Yes, over here.
Okay, it involves a process.
Okay, there's certainly a process. Okay. Yes, Leo.
Identifying a problem.
Identifying a problem.
Statistical analysis for research.
Yes, statistics definitely. Okay. Anything else that comes to your mind? Yes.
Clients giving results.
There are results.
Data collection.
Probably we have to use certain instruments to collect data.
Yes, there are specific instruments that we use, and definitely, okay, one of the aspects that is the most important is that we are going to have a formal moment to collect data in a very systematic way. And actually, probably this is the heart of the research itself, because it's so systematic, because there is a process with specific stages, okay, to make sure that we have a very clear discipline and that we have a very clear result at the end, at least, okay, from the point of view of the design of the research itself, which depends on us, okay? Now, there are different types of research, and probably when you have read different articles, or probably you have heard different speakers talk to you about the field, okay, whether they were talking about grammar, or pronunciation, lexis, etc., okay, and they talk about research, okay? So probably you have heard about quantitative research that has to do with the numbers, okay, of objective information that can be quantified, okay, percentages, etc. Okay, or qualitative, for example, research, in which you have to come up with descriptions, interpretations, okay, of a certain problem, situation, okay, or behavior. Okay, experimental research too, in which you conduct an experiment and then you collect all the data from that experiment and then you come up with some questions, hypotheses, okay, results, solutions, etc. So there are many terms really related to research. The purpose of this talk is not really to talk about the big word research, okay, because that would be too lengthy for just 1 hour or 1 hour and a half, okay, but the focus of this presentation is going to be the simplest way and the friendliest way to conduct research for teachers, which is action research. But before we go into that, I'd like to go over the concept itself. Okay, and here is defining action research. It refers to teacher-conducted classroom research seeking to clarify and resolve practical teaching issues and problems. The great thing about action research is that all of you, okay, on a day-to-day basis, okay, depending on how often you get together in your classes, you face problems that have to do with the class. The students, you yourself, okay, the instruction, the materials, etc. So the positive aspect about action research, and probably the reason why it's so popular nowadays, is that it has to do with the immediate reality that the teachers have on an everyday basis. It's not something that, unfortunately, some people feel like, oh, well, maybe it's just a fancy thing, okay, that the experts are talking about. Well, they understand what they are working on, okay, or probably that's more the work of a specific experiment in an office, okay, conducted by a group of scholars, etc., but that sounds like far away from our reality. But the good thing about action research is that it has to do with your everyday action in class, and that's the interesting part here. Okay, so research here, to begin with, is a systematic approach to carry out investigations and collecting information. So definitely, what you have in mind is that there is a sequence, order, discipline, okay, organization. And the next part, action. Practical action to resolve the problems. Okay, you identify a problem, okay, you collect data about it, then you intervene there, and then you get some results. Okay, if you want, you can then go back and repeat the cycle, which we are going to be looking at later. What are the characteristics of action research? How do you know that what you're doing is actual research? The essential goal is to improve teaching and learning, okay? In the institutions that you work for, definitely, okay, this is a general reality of our country. We have people with different backgrounds, okay? Sometimes we have people who are really specialized in education. Sometimes we have people who are specialized in the field of ELT, English language teaching. Sometimes people who are in linguistics, psychology, etc. But the truth is that the backgrounds of the professionals who work as our colleagues in our institutions is very varied. And the intention of action research is to improve teaching, enhance learning. The next aspect is conducted during the process of regular classroom teaching. Okay, you are assigned a class, okay, then that means that there is a very big opportunity for you to conduct action research. This is one characteristic that makes it so popular. We all know that teachers are very busy, okay? And sometimes we would like to conduct maybe more extensive research, but research, okay, that is really the big word, okay, sometimes takes like 20 years, okay, 1 year, 6 months, etc., okay? But the range of time is sometimes so long that we can barely decide, okay, how far, okay, we want to go with in-depth research. So the easiest way for the average teacher is to conduct something that is small scale, okay, 1 month, okay, maybe one course which goes over 4 months, okay, or 1 year in school, okay, in which you can do some kind of follow-up, but that will depend on you. But this is really, okay, the simplest way to approach research. It is intended to resolve problems, like I told you before, rather than be research for its own sake. Okay, some people simply start doing research because the moment that you're conducting research, for example, on, say, how native speakers, okay, of Spanish process information, okay, or different learning strategies, okay, what kinds of, for example, pronunciation aspects they have problems with, etc. And then it's more like heuristics, okay, research. It's more exploratory, like let's see what happens, okay. And right after that process, then we say, okay, now I'm going to conduct more specific research in this aspect, okay. But this one basically has to do with, I have a problem in class as a teacher, okay. What kind of action am I going to take? And let's see what happens. Next is carried out by one or more teachers, okay. If it is difficult to get somebody else, okay, you can do it yourself. But of course it's going to be a little bit more demanding because you will be doing two things. You are teaching at the same time that you are collecting the information and analyzing the situation, okay. If you find somebody else to do it with you, like some kind of team research, okay, the other person can be acting as some sort of an observer, okay, and he might be detecting things that probably you are not looking at because you are so busy, okay, with conducting the learning process in class. What are the procedures of action research? The first thing that you have to keep in mind is selecting an issue or concern to examine, okay? When we select the issue or concern to examine, okay, we are thinking about potential problems that our students have. What are some of the problems that you remember from your classes, for example? I'll tell you one that is very common. Most teachers complain about that. My students always have problems with grammar. For example, one specific point, the use of the present perfect. What specific function, okay, to distinguish, for example, the use of the present perfect against the simple past. I think that's a very common thing among all of us, and we face that, and we continue, okay, finding students who, even though we teach, okay, or we prepare wonderful lessons, still there seems to be a problem, okay. What other aspects, okay, can you think of that your students have problems with in class? You can raise your hand and just let me know. Yes, Elisa.
Motivation in class to participate actively.
Motivation, involvement of students, yes.
Usually the students have problems with pronunciation.
Pronunciation, yes, different aspects of pronunciation. Anything else? Yes?
All of students they usually face the problem of listening.
Listening, all right. Good. So this is just to show you, okay, the very first thing that you have to think of is selecting an issue that you wish to study, okay, or to try out in class and to see what happens. Next is selecting an appropriate procedure for collecting the information. Okay, like if you have already identified a problem with your students or in your class, okay, how are you going to collect the information formally? Okay, are you going to be using interviews, surveys? Are you just going to maybe discuss the problem with your students with the whole class, etc.? I'm going to show you common ways of collecting information later. Next. After you have collected information and conducting the interviews, the surveys, etc., okay, you have to analyze it and then decide what changes may be necessary. This is more like, okay, you are facing the problem and then let's think about a way, okay, to face this problem. Next, developing an action plan to help bring about the desired change in classroom behavior, okay? And the plan responds to an organization's systematic implementation of the solution, because it's not as easy as my students have a problem with this grammar aspect, for example, or for example, they have problems with listening for specific information, and they say, well, I'm probably going to bring more activities and that's it. Okay, but more, you have to design a plan on how you wish to change that situation. That is not just doing more of something, but more like, okay, how am I going to go about it? Talk to your students, devise a strategy to work with the class, and then we'll see what reactions happen along the way. Next is observing the effects of the plan. And for this, you need to be very sensitive, okay? You need to be very perceptive about the reactions of the students, not just at the cognitive level, okay? which is basically the intellectual part, how they process, okay, they understand, okay, what is being done, they come up with the right answers, etc. But also the metacognitive one, okay, which is knowing how they are approaching the problem and if they are thinking about solutions themselves, and they are also becoming reflective, just like the teacher, okay, to take care of the problem that they have. And collecting the information definitely, and not, okay, not leaving any detail out. Okay, the psychological aspect is definitely very important here too. Okay, many times the problem is not so much, okay, the linguistic part or the pedagogical part, but also, okay, the psychological, the affect part. Next, initiating a second action cycle if need be. Like you want to repeat the cycle because maybe you are not really sure, okay, that you have collected information and that you've seen a reaction that you desired, okay, or that you expected at the beginning. Maybe you need to modify, okay, some of your intervention or some of your plan, okay, to change or to reverse the problem. Next, implementing action research. And I think this is of particular interest, and I intentionally put it here, okay, for those of you who work with other people, maybe in teamwork, all right, or coordinators, academic directors, etc. The first thing that we have to think about for anybody who is involved in doing action research, why am I doing it? It's for my own sake, maybe for professional development, maybe it's part of a specific assignment, okay, or research project because I'm doing a master's degree, okay, or it's an assignment in school in general, okay. Is it part of the policy? Okay, does the institution ask the teachers, okay, or the academic department to take part of action research on a regular basis? Or maybe it's the basic reason that most of us think about, which is my students have a problem, I want to help them. Next, the topic. What issue do you wish to explore, okay, or to work on? Okay, like we discussed before, grammar, pronunciation, vocabulary, different macro skills, listening, reading, speaking, okay, class management maybe, all right, how the students maybe work in groups effectively, ineffectively, okay, motivation, etc., etc., etc. Remember that depending on how much time, okay, you have in order to conduct your research, because you are going to be the ones who are going to decide how long you wish to work on that. 1 month, 2, 3, 4, okay, the entire year, maybe do a follow-up with 2 groups, etc. Okay, but you will have to decide that based on the topic too. If your topic is too broad, okay, it will be very difficult to approach it so that you can collect enough information for you to decide, okay, what the specific solution will be, okay, and what the outcomes should be. All right. So, for example, I would never choose something like, okay, well, my students have problems with vocabulary because that's too broad a category. Okay. Or, for example, my students only have problems with reading. Okay. But what aspects of reading? Okay. Those of you who attended the talk given by Anthony Acevedo, okay, have seen already all the different aspects and how specific reading can be. Okay, so I recommend that you do action research if you decide to do it, for example, on reading, just based on one skill, okay, or one style of reading, okay, so that I can help you to work out the solutions, okay, and do the follow-up more easily. The next aspect is the focus, okay, how can I narrow down the issue? Always think about, okay, for example, if it is a skill, okay, don't take the skill, but maybe micro skills, sub-skills. If it is, for example, listening for specific information. Or, for example, listening to interviews, okay, or weather forecasts. That's something very specific, of course, that is pertinent, okay, to your class or to your curriculum or the materials that you are using in class. Next is the mode. What data collecting methods are you going to be using, okay? Are you going to be collecting the information by maybe taking notes, okay, interviews, etc. that I'm going to show you later. Next is the timing. How long do you expect, okay, your research to be conducted along your course or your year, okay, with the group that you are working with? Don't forget that for the timing, okay? It will be a good idea for you maybe to share this with a colleague, okay, who probably has the same course, and definitely, okay, to work closely with the academic department so that they can maybe give you a hand, okay, on some of the additional things that you might need to conduct the research, some facilities. And this is where we come to the resources. What help, whether it's human or material, would you need? For example, if you have to be very careful with that, okay, so that nobody feels uncomfortable when you are conducting research in class. You can even tell them, the purpose is to improve, okay, our classes and to make sure that you really get what you are expected to be getting or what you want to get out of the class itself, okay? Improve the learning and improve the instruction. Okay, now you have to take the class and it says, what kind of change of activities will I have, for example? If the students initially had a problem with a speaking activity in group work, okay, what did I see in this tape, okay, that somehow was affecting, okay, the result that I wanted to see or the reaction that I want to see at the beginning, which is active participation, okay? So you will have to think about, maybe I'm putting the same people all the time together, or maybe I'm changing them too often, or maybe there are too many girls in one group and only one boy, okay, or too many boys, etc. Okay, or maybe the ages, if you work, for example, for an institution like a Binational Center, okay, do you have too many teenagers with one adult, etc. The mechanics, okay, are your groups maybe always too close, okay, to the back of the room, to the front, okay, they are too close together so they feel uncomfortable because the space is so small that they don't feel comfortable talking, okay? Are there so many different personalities in your classes so that when you put them together, people feel that they are maybe too exposed, okay, or that they have so many differences in the way that they are that maybe they feel uncomfortable and they simply shut off? Okay, these are some of the things that you start speculating, okay, and then think about how you are going to change that situation. The membership, okay, of the students among the groups, are they friends? Okay, like it could be positive, but at the same time it could be negative, because if they feel too comfy, okay, chances are that they will start their own club in one corner of the room, okay, and then let the others aside. So there are really a lot of different things that you can start speculating about. Focus, remember, on different things, okay? Most of us, because of the lack of time, focus a little bit more on the language itself, the linguistic aspect. All my students do not know the form here, for example, the past tense form, okay, the ED form, okay, etc. But you also have to think about the communicative aspect, okay, which is what do students do with the language, okay? What is preventing them, okay, from using the language the way they should be doing it? And then last but not least, okay, the affect part, okay, the psychological aspect, okay. Why is it that they are not responding? All right? Are there any questions up to this point? Is everything clear? Hello, is everybody still with me? Or the party yesterday was too long? Okay, what can you tell me about this one here? I keep correcting my students' errors in speaking, and they continue making them. Okay? Say, for example, that the common use of do, does, did. Okay. Question. When they reach a very advanced level in your institution, do your students, okay, give you perfect use or display perfect use of do, does, and did? Even though they know that they are speaking about present tense and they are reporting maybe facts in present tense and in past tense, which is the functional aspect. But do they always get it perfect? Seldom, okay? Something else that happens is like, they know what they're talking about, but still they make mistakes, okay? So what is going on here? And if you ask them, okay, they can even tell you the rule, and they say, well, every time that I have, for example, the third person singular form, okay, I have to use that, blah, 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 blah. And they can even recite the rules, or they can even draw a chart, okay? So apparently everything is perfect there, but still they make the mistakes when they have to speak, all right? So the question here is, okay, how am I going to go about this? Supposing that this were your actual research topic, okay? I'm going to go back to the transparency. where we have all the different aspects, okay, of conducting the research. And I would like you to talk with the person next to you, okay, and to try to think about the different, okay, reasons, okay, ways of collecting information, etc., okay. And then I'm going to give you some feedback on that. We're going to discuss that. All right?
Sounds top.
Here we have the different aspects that I would like you to think about. Okay, once you have identified, okay, the aspect, think about the purpose, okay, what specific focus you want to give to that topic or that problem, what mode, the data collecting methods that you would like to use, the timing, resources, the product, the action, and reporting. Okay? If anybody has any problem, okay, just let me know. I'm going to be walking around, okay? Thank you. In your class, as I was walking around, okay, would somebody like to volunteer? I'm not reading. Majid, in the back, please.
In our group, three of us, we came up with the following, going according to your chart. The purpose why we are doing this is to raise awareness among the students. They also call it noticing, so that sometimes they make mistakes, but they don't really notice what's going on. So they notice which part of the error correction we are worried about.
So it's just initial, because you only want them to be aware, to notice, but not, okay, to master, okay, or automatize whatever that you're working on. Okay.
Then the topic we discussed is error correction, and then to make them slowly, to make a plan of action research so that this will be solved in the future. We don't expect it to be solved within a 1 month session that we are with them.
Okay.
Then how can I narrow this? We are going to do it only during the speaking time. So in the 1 hour or 2 hour class, there are lots of things going on. We have to make sure that while speaking, the students are participating in speaking activities. The following should happen. One, if the institution has a video camera, we have to film that. But just put it in automatic. We don't need to bring anybody in to film. So leave it in one corner and it's filming. The second one, since the teacher will be very busy trying to find out the errors, it's good if you can invite another teacher who the students are familiar with. So that person can help you really observe not only the students, but also you, if you're correcting the errors or you're missing some opportunities to correct the errors. This is from Ron Schwartz. And the other one is make the students responsible. If you make, for example, for every class you make 3 students responsible, you say that there's going to be this speaking activity. You 3 are supposed to listen carefully, and every time this kind of error that you have discussed in class comes up, please make a note, and after maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes, let's start discussing it. So the students become responsible to notice those errors, and then you will change these roles after every maybe 2 days or 3 days. So these students are not always observers. Sometimes they participate, and others will start noticing the mistakes that are happening. And it says for how long? We decided that initially 1 month would be enough, but after every week, that means the end of the week, every Friday, there has to be a discussion and feedback session. So we have to see what has gone on, and at the end of the week, discuss it with everybody so they come along. It's not that only the teacher wants to realize what's going on. Our interest is that the students should notice what's going on.
And the discussion will happen between the teacher and the whole class?
And the whole class.
Groups?
And the whole class.
The whole class?
Yes.
Okay.
And in case of extreme error correction, which is another idea of Ron Schwartz, he believes that we have to really correct mistakes. We shouldn't let things go. The idea is as soon as the error comes up, the one we are looking for, we should forget about others at this time, but this particular one we are looking for, as soon as this comes up, stop the class, stop the activities, and let everybody start participating. Why did this error come up? How did it come up? What is the correct form? For a short while doing this, so that this will be understood completely by the students, and they will start becoming aware, and then possibly with this awareness, they are not going to repeat it in the future. And then ask the academic director if this class will be assigned to you a couple months away, so that you can see what you have done with them. Has it remained, or they're forgotten about? That's what we decided.
Okay, okay. Now, remember that the main thing that you have to focus on is one given problem. From what Majid has told us, okay, what they were discussing, what is the problem that he has identified in his class? Okay, the errors. What kind of errors? Okay, in what skill, for example? Speaking. Okay. Any sub-skill in speaking? Did you think of any sub-skill in particular?
We just said while we're speaking.
In general, okay.
Any
No specific type, okay, topic.
Anytime speaking activity comes up, then all the attention.
All right. So, what seems to be the problem? Okay, they are making errors, okay, or maybe too many mistakes, even though maybe they are, they know, okay, or they have a certain level, and they are making mistakes that they shouldn't be making, okay, but they are still making mistakes in speaking, okay. What is the action that he's planning to take?
As soon as he comes the error, he's going to stop the class and make the students think about it and reflect on that and find and overcome that problem.
Okay, so first, we have identified the problem. The second thing is, how is a teacher going to intervene? Okay, supposedly, okay, the person who is working on action research will decide, okay, from all the possibilities that I have for intervention, what kind of intervention am I going to have? How am I going to design that? Okay, how is it going to happen? In this case, it's going to be that every time, okay, that they have a speaking activity and there are, I don't know if the first error or maybe a number of errors, you will also have to decide that. Okay.
We decided that if it becomes too common, then every time it happens, we have to stop.
And it may be interrupting the flow, okay, of the exchange of information. And it's okay, we stop and we focus on the errors and we discuss, okay, what kind of error it is, okay, why it happened, and what needed to be reinforced, etc. Okay, so that's the action. Okay, after you do this, what is the next step, okay, that you have to take? You have identified the problem, you have come up with a potential solution, and you have introduced the change in your class. What else do you need to do after this? You have to check the outcome, okay? Once again, you collect information. They say, okay, now let's see what happens. Another speaking activity, and let's see what happens. Supposedly, okay, if the initial intention of Majid was to make them better aware, okay, to notice, okay, we would like to know whether this has changed, and if they are really noticing after you introduce the change. What happens if there is no change or very little change? You have to reformulate, okay, your solution, exactly. So maybe there is something, okay, that is not working the way, okay, that you would like them to work actually in class, okay, or to give you the solutions or the kind of result that you expect, okay. Chances are, for example, that our students might not know how to notice, okay, because noticing is also a skill, okay, that you build up in our students. Sometimes, okay, if you work a lot with discovery learning, okay, in grammar, okay, you basically show the structures of the forms after they have already understood the communicative purpose, and then you simply ask them to compare one thing against the other, and the student should be telling you, okay, what is different here? Okay, I have this auxiliary here, okay, there is this suffix there, okay, this is the word order, etc. Okay, but some students, unfortunately, okay, if this is not explained to them explicitly, okay, they cannot notice. No matter how many times you tell them, but notice, okay, take a look at it, okay, you're going to get something out of that. Some students are not just ready for that, okay, because we have different learning styles and not everybody is aware of everything as we would like them to. So we have to help them, okay. So right here, supposing, okay, that this didn't work, I will have to reformulate my solution. And then probably I would think, if this is the topic, like this, maybe they don't know how to go about it. They don't know how to notice. So if they don't know how to do this, what do I have to do as a teacher? Give them those tools. And then come back again, and then after, okay, that action that I have taken, okay, see what happens. And see if there are potential, okay, changes in the situation.
Sometimes the data collection instrument that they're using does not feed the requirement, does not feed expectations that you want to get, no? If you are designing an action plan and your focus is not narrowed down correctly, you might be getting results that you didn't plan. And besides that, if the instrument you're using for collecting data is not appropriate, then the results are going to be completely different.
Yes, that is true too. And one thing that I recommend is that something else that may happen is that after you have conducted this action research, okay, first, the initial action research, who knows, other topics, okay, or other aspects in relation to this problem may arise, and that will catch your interest. Please be very careful, okay, to stay on track, okay, and to continue working on your initial, okay, idea. Until you finish, it's not advisable, okay, to go into something else, because otherwise it would not be very clear-cut in terms of the results. Like, okay, there was this problem, I took this action, and these are the results. Okay, hopefully positive. Okay, if you start thinking about other aspects, then you might never finish. Okay. All right. Is everything clear so far? How do you feel about this type of research? Is it very difficult? Is it difficult to implement in your classes or in your programs? Not really. Okay, this is really what every single teacher does on an everyday basis. Okay, we teach, we find problems, we try to come up with the solutions. What happens though is that many times a lot of the interesting solutions that teachers come up with, whether they are experienced or maybe very smart about coming up with, very creative coming up with a solution, they are not reported officially. Okay, so I don't think that it would be a good idea to wait, okay, for other people to say exactly the same thing that we already know. Okay, so in order to improve, okay, and to multiply the effect of sharing, training, and improving, okay, the teaching caliber in our country, the best thing to do would be to start doing this formal action research and to start sharing with your community. Okay, now, to finish, I'd like to go over the benefits of conducting action research. Okay, everybody with me here? That's in your handout. First, adds a research dimension to existing practice. Okay, and this is some kind of building up the professional pride, okay, that teachers should have, that they are doing something to some extent scientific, serious, and that other people in your field can benefit from. Provides a way to better understand and enhance the teaching practice. Okay, it's not just that, well, okay, I don't know how to go about this particular aspect of teaching. I go to a book and I do what the book says. No, but it's more like, okay, this is what the experts tell me. Okay, let's see how this happens in my reality. Is it necessary to make some adaptations, changes? Okay, because we are in a very specific context, in which case, if there are very specific modifications, okay, this would be like an additional application of an approach, a philosophy in teaching, but particularly, okay, adapted to your context. And this would be a very interesting, okay, aspect of research for the rest of the world and for the academic community in general. Next, empowers the teachers to come up with solutions to everyday in-class problems. Normally, what is expected in general in class? They say, if a teacher has a problem, okay, the teacher probably recurs to a more experienced teacher, senior, okay. If nothing happens, okay, well, let's see, who is supposed to have the solution? Or who is expected to have the solution? Supervisors, coordinators, academic director. He must know, okay. But the problem is that probably those people, supervisors, coordinators, directors, are even facing the same type of problem. So instead of depending, okay, on others, okay, involves the teachers then in decision making this way, and consequently causes teachers to feel like a bigger part in program innovations and change. Okay, this way you are not just like, okay, I'm some kind of spectator in my class. Or
as I said, I'll give you. Are you comfortable with that distinction? Yeah, I'll give you some examples. I've got some examples on the next slide. Let me just finish the framework first. So, people like some of the people who adopt what I call a strong interpretation of task-based learning say, all you need is love. No, all you need is pedagogical tasks of one kind. Love helps, by the way. If you love your students, they will learn. Although some of them are pretty hard to love, aren't they? But if the argument here is all you need is pedagogical tasks of one kind or another. You don't have to focus on grammar. I mean, this was Steve Krashen's position, for example. No need to focus on grammar. No need to do pronunciation exercises. The learners will acquire these things subconsciously and automatically. Right? The weak interpretation, and I belong to the weak interpretation school, is that is an overstatement. And there is some research to support this. That if you have a curriculum, an identical curriculum, one of which only gets the learners engaged in tasks, no focus on form at all, and then another one where there is a focus on form, that learners in the second classroom will progress more successfully in their language work. And so in my curricula, the curricula that I develop in my materials, there is a systematic focus on form. But notice it comes in as enabling skills. And this is where the big difference is between a traditional approach, where the starting point is the focus on form, and here, where the focus on form comes in as a support to the learning process. And I've drawn a distinction here between language exercises and communicative activities. A language exercise, I've already given you one example, fill in the blanks. Another one would be, the scrambled sentence exercise, where the learners have to put words in sequence. You have words from sentences on cards, and they have to put the cards in order to make a grammatically correct sentence, or they have to match questions and answers to make a conversation and practice it. These are all examples of language exercises. A communicative activity is kind of halfway between a task and an exercise. It has a focus on, what it shares in common with a language exercise is that it has a focus on usually one particular grammatical feature, but it also has a communicative dimension as well. For example, practicing yes/no questions for with like and likes. Do you like, say, particular kinds of movies? Do you like thrillers? Do you like comedies? Do you like westerns? You could do that as a drill, couldn't you? Okay. Do you like westerns? He, does he like westerns? She, does she like westerns? Thrillers, does she like thrillers? That really boring old drill stuff. The alternative is to turn it into a survey. Okay. And get students going around the class, maybe get them to construct the survey themselves, using movies that are popular with them or not so popular, and then getting them to go around the class and surveying the other students. So they're getting the same practice as they would in the old-fashioned drilling approach, but they're doing it within a communicative context. There's a communicative dimension because they don't know what answer the person in questioning is going to give. Okay, so these are all of the kinds of elements that go into making up my approach to task-based language teaching. Okay, so what I'm trying to do is not to throw out the good practices from the past, but to incorporate them and to reorient the ways in which we do these things in class. Let me now give you some examples to help clarify some of these different task types. So here's an example of a real-world task. These are the kinds of things that we do in everyday life. Call the airline and reconfirm a reservation you have. Provide personal details such as name, flight number and date. Check other details such as terminal, time of departure, and time you have to be at the airport, and your seating preference. My seating preference is seat 1A. I do anything to try and travel first class. You know, I even get on the plane backwards and pretend that I'm going towards economy. But so this is an example of a real world task, and I've given you lots of other examples as well. You know, listening to the weather forecast, ordering food and drink, and so on. Here would be an example of a rehearsal task that would be a pedagogical task that comes under that classification of rehearsal that would be systematically linked to the real-world task I've just given you the example of pair work role play. So students in pairs, one's a passenger calling to reconfirm a reservation, and you could perhaps give them e-tickets. Do you know about these e-ticket things? They scare the hell out of me. You know, I'm very nervous when I go to the airport, yeah, I have nothing, you know. There's no evidence that I've actually paid for this ticket. And so use the e-ticket provided separately to check details of your flight. And B, you're an airline employee, use the information sheet, and you'd give them an information sheet about different flight details to answer your partner's questions. Okay? So there's a clear relationship between the things that the learners are doing in class and the things that they will be doing potentially outside of the classroom. How about then, do you remember what the other kind of pedagogical task was? Activation task, yeah. So let's have a look at an example of an activation task. This one is taken from my Go For It series, and it's a spot the difference. It's a kind of information gap. You know, a spot the difference task where students working in pairs, one of them has a picture like this one, and student B has a picture like that one. Right? That one. And that one. And their task is to spot 10 differences in the two pictures. So, why is this not a rehearsal task? Well, I don't know about you, but I've never in my life, outside of a classroom, see somebody go up to somebody else and say, how many birds have you got sitting on your elephant? Okay? Well, guess what's in my picture? And so the rationale, if somebody comes into the classroom and says, well, why on earth are your students doing this task? Because they don't do that kind of thing outside class. The answer is they're activating the language that they're practicing. Okay? And these tasks can be of two different kinds. They can be focused activation tasks or unfocused activation tasks. Right? A focused activation task is one where the learners have to use certain grammatical structures in order to complete the task successfully. In an unfocused task, they can use any language, whatever they like. Right? Yeah. So some of the simulations that you have, or some problem-solving tasks, often the learners can use any of the language at all. There's no particular structure. Is this a focused or an unfocused task? Yes, this is a focused task. There are certain language structures like there is, there are, and also prepositions on, between, beside. If you don't have that language, you cannot complete the task successfully. Okay? So this would be a focused activation task. So is the distinction between rehearsal tasks and activation tasks clear? Good. Okay, fine. I'm now going to look at some principles that are very important in task-based language teaching. In task-based language teaching, the learners do not begin the learning process by having language drills. You know, in the traditional approach, they do lots and lots of drills, and then they get to practice those drills, and then maybe they might get to do some communicative type exercises or activities. In task-based language teaching, the learners encounter the language in context at the beginning of the learning sequence. Okay? So it's similar to when you go and live in another country or visit another country and you just try and pick the language up and make sense of the language from the context. But it's very important that learning be scaffolded, that lessons and materials provide a supporting framework. You all know what a scaffold is, don't you? Okay? It's the framework that goes up around a building to support the building when it's being put up. And so I'm using the term scaffolding as a metaphor. Okay? And I like to see myself as a scaffolder. Right? I mean, that's what... And we can always... I sometimes with my trainee teachers, I say, well, what kind of metaphor captures your approach as a teacher? Is it informant? Is it circus ringmaster? Is it entertainer? Okay? Or is it all of these things? Mine is a scaffolder. And we provide scaffolding as teachers, also as parents, you know. How many of you have children? Okay. Do you remember teaching them how to walk? Yeah? You say, okay, Johnny, it's time to learn to walk now, stand up. Okay, now, here's how you walk. You distribute your weight evenly on both feet, then you transfer all of your weight, or most of your weight, onto your right leg, and as you do so, you swing your left leg through an arc of about 60 degrees. Right? When the leg reaches the apotheosis or the apogee of the swing at the front of you, you tend to fall on your face. Okay? However, you won't fall on your face because your leg will arrest your development. But as you do so, if you swing your right leg smoothly through another arc and attempt to repeat the process, you'll find that you're walking. Okay? So is that how you taught your kids to walk? No, how did you do it? Of course not. You scaffolded it, didn't you? You said, okay, Johnny, you're 3 now, it's time to learn to walk. Okay? So, take Daddy's hand. Okay? That's it. Yeah, very good. Good work, Johnny. And then gradually, see how you're scaffolding, your hands are supporting, providing a supporting framework. Then what do? You don't, for the rest of Johnny's life, go around like that, do you? You gradually remove one hand, then you remove the other hand, and poor little Johnny falls flat on his face, doesn't he? But what you're doing, you're scaffolding the experience of learning to walk. And of course, yes, if you never let go of Johnny's hand, of course he's going to fall over. But if you never let go of his hand, he's always going to be dependent on you. He's not going to develop the independent skills that he needs to walk successfully. And it's the same with learning. If we never remove the scaffolding, our learners will not develop the autonomy that they will need to be successful language learners and successful language users. Here's an example of scaffolding. Imagine that you were doing that spot the difference task, you know, with the people, the 2 kids at the zoo. You might like to begin by giving the students a little practice dialogue.
Let's see what we can do. After lunch, it's not going to be easy for anyone, for you or for me, and for me at the end of here. Okay, basically wanted to know a little about your interests. I know you're interested in the topic of assessment, and especially in particular, I was asked to talk about oral assessment. What are you mostly interested in, or what would you like to hear about? Any brave volunteers to break the ice? With or without a microphone? No?
I think it's difficult to come up with instruments that assess oral effectively. So what my concern is.
Okay. Assessment tasks to instruments to evaluate oral assessment. What else?
What about quality control in terms of oral assessment from one teacher to the next or one classroom to the next?
Right. Okay. Any other ideas? Tasks to evaluate oral performance, how to control performance of evaluators and ensure greater reliability. What else? Any other main concerns? Those are 2 of the areas we're going to talk about, and in a way, is this working? Hello? Can you see anything there? No se ve en la pantalla. Great. Thank you. We're going to be talking about how we're relating our evaluations and how we design any assessment program to the aims and resources of the program. And the main title was working on fairness and transparency in our evaluations. So we'll see different ways how we can make our results more transparent in a way, if they are aligned with the aims and resources of the program, and starting from the needs and expectations of the learners, how we can design a general test type that we'll need for each particular context to select the best techniques and tasks that you were referring to develop the most appropriate marking system or rating system, and then training interviewers, evaluators to make sure that the test works properly. We wouldn't start with the tasks, probably we will start with the goals and the construct and how the test, what the test is aiming at and what we're expecting to obtain, the kind of information we're trying to get with the test in order to select those appropriate tasks. And there will be opportunities to improve the transparency in our evaluations in all these different stages, obviously. There will be things to do at the diagnostic level at the beginning, and to make sure that the evaluations really fit the program and our needs. The design of the test, the construct, the goals of the test that we're developing, the techniques that we use, do they really reflect those goals that we were aiming at and those needs that we were diagnosing from the beginning? And how are we evaluating the results that we see, the performances that we get from students? Are all these steps properly aligned? So, to begin with the first one, in a way, to really focus our test and to make sure that it's a purposeful assessment task that is really aiming at a specific context and a specific target population. It can be our classroom in a particular assessment activity, or it can be a whole program that we're designing an evaluation for. It depends on what each of you needs in a way. And as we talk, we won't have too much time really to talk about this. I'd like you to think about any special group that you have a main concern with in terms of assessment, and see if there's anything, when we are talking about everything, all these steps, if there's anything that applies to that context, or to that special group, or to that special situation that you're concerned about. Is there any special problem you want to solve in terms of assessment? Would you like to evaluate the oral performance of some of your students, one student, level in a way that you want to improve in a certain way? Keep that in mind, or write it down so that you can refer to this as we keep on talking. So the first step after the proper diagnosis, who the students are, why they're studying English, why they're here in a way, and they're already with us. What is the construct of this test? Well, what are we going to expect? What are the goals for this test in a way? We have to define the elements that or the aspects of speaking that we're going to be evaluating. What kind of performance are we going to expect? What would you like to hear from them? What is speaking in a way? What do you think in your classes? What kinds of speaking take place? And you need to speak. I have to rest for a minute. Go ahead. Guided speaking for some levels. It might be different in different courses, classes, students. But what is speaking in a way? How just a response to a question we'll be speaking? Does it have to be a full conversation or a kind of presentation, or what would you expect for the particular group that you're thinking of? What will speaking be for you for that particular course?
So they need to be able to get the meaning across. They are engaged in a communicative activity.
Okay. What kind of will it be an interactive type of thing?
More spontaneous things that they are interested in how much they can produce in the language.
Okay. Any other idea? Is anyone thinking of any group that might require a less interactive type of speaking, something that is more monologic or more personal types of speaking that are addressing an audience and the audience doesn't have to reply in a way, or for English more academic purposes in which they have to listen to a lecture and the lecturer has to be able to deliver, to make meaning across, to express different ideas, but it doesn't imply there will be interaction among them. Or if you're going to evaluate a very interactive task, the tasks that you will use for both purposes will be different. So we have to know and describe from the beginning what kind of speaking we will expect. Brief description of the behavior we will expect will do. It doesn't have to be very complicated for our purposes. If we're going to develop a high-stakes test, something that will be used for admission purposes for universities, or they will get a job or will not get a job depending on that, in that case that definition has to be very precise, very clear, and it needs to be validated in different instances, in different ways. But from the classroom uses to high-stakes testing situations, we all start with the same, from the same beginning. So in a way, we have to develop this, there's a relationship when we're thinking about what kind of speaking we will be evaluating and how we will evaluate it. We have to define what we're expecting from the beginning, but in a way it has to be something practical. We're not going to be able to spend 5 days evaluating students to make sure that they can actually speak or they can actually produce something to meet the expectations that we have. So we have to make sure that the kind of speaking we're defining and the construct of the test in terms of speaking and the goals matches our task specifications and the kind of activities we're going to use to evaluate, to elicit that kind of oral behavior, performance. And they have to be appropriately evaluated. We have to be able to train certain evaluators to use a certain system or instrument in the same way. So it doesn't depend on the evaluator to assign a different grade and on his mood or the situation or the student, or everyone should be able to be evaluated in the same way, and every evaluator has to be trained in a certain way to be able to perform reliably. And though speaking cannot be reproduced, we cannot speak in exactly the same way in two different situations. The behaviors we want to elicit are certain measures that will give us information to make assumptions about that person's ability to use English in oral communication. So if we go through this kind of triangle in a way, making sure that they are all well aligned, we would start defining speaking. We can use different forms. One, in your handout you have some lists, micro skills and macro skills, taken from Brown, that describe different levels of speaking that you might be interested in looking at when you're defining what kind of speaking you will be evaluating. If it's a children's program, it will be different from an adult program. It changes according to ages, the purposes of the course, the levels of English, their needs. Some people will be interested in a more precise, teachers or students might need a more detailed report of that kind of behavior, that the test will need to provide a certain report on their performance. And others might just need a certain score to be able to be compared to other people's performances. So depending again on our initial goals and our expectations from the beginning, we will need to define the levels of speaking that we're aiming at. And these lists can help in a way to narrow down our definition of speaking, this one or other possibilities really, to our context, for a special context. You can refer to this or speaking you're starting with. For example, ECC is one of the exams that the English Language Institute develops, and it has a component, speaking component. One of the sections of the test is to evaluate speaking, and it is a high-stakes test in a way. The speaking part is administered by local interviewers and different evaluators in different countries, so we have to make sure that those scores are reliable. We produce training materials for all of them, and we do certain quality control checks in different ways. And we'll later talk a little about some changes in our scales and how we're working on that with the rest of the evaluators. But the way speaking, after several years, the current definition of the construct, what this test in terms of speaking is evaluating, is the interactive, to examine the candidate's ability to sustain an interaction on a familiar topic. That's what we define in terms of speaking for this special test. We're going to be evaluating a candidate's ability to sustain an interaction on a familiar topic. What do you infer from this? What will you, even, especially those who are not that familiar with that test, what do you infer from that definition? What do you know about the test?
From this description, what I can infer is that the applicant, the candidate of the exam, has to be able to communicate in a familiar topic, as it says, without any problem, yes, and get his meaning across without any problem either, yes. But not with, at a technical level, let's say, not a specialized level, but in every daily situation.
Okay, what else? Any other inferences?
Okay, I think that in the very first part where it says exchange of personal information, I imagine questions, okay, coming back and forth with the respective answers between the interviewer and interviewee. I don't know if you maybe have pairs or small groups talk to each other while the interviewer observes and takes notes. But at any rate, what I can see from the very first part is basically questions and the expected answers. You want me to talk about the others too, or just the first one, Fernando?
Whatever you...
For the second one, I imagine some kind of given input, I don't know, through a picture or maybe a situation, and probably the students are going to be asked questions about it. And the last one, it might be something that they have to read, or maybe some kind of problem that is posed to them, and then they have to give an opinion on that. And I think that in number 3, probably what we're looking for is a lot of paragraph speaking and a lot of the use of connectors on how they organize information and how they deliver that, and they make themselves understood.
Well, this has been my question for a while in terms of testing for oral competency, and that is, I think that the interchange program that I've known does a lot of 1 and 2, but to a certain extent 3, the longer elaboration, like an 8-minute solo narrative, isn't that common in a day-to-day course. So to a certain extent, I kind of think that sometimes the teachers or the people within the institutions that are creating assessment there's a tension between their commitment to the communicative nature of the book and following that program, but they're aware of assessments like the Michigan or other assessments which don't always coincide with the way the courses have developed, and especially if the emphasis is on communication, where in a national exam it's communication with accuracy. So that seems to be the big issue.
Yeah, sure. Any other comments, inferences, questions about this? Do you need a little more light?
Yes.
It's kind of a little dark. Okay. Yeah, that's a big issue, really. And this test is not related to any particular course of study or any syllabus or textbook or country, even. It's administered in many places and in different situations, and people like vary as young as 12, 14-year-olds to adults at any age, really. So that's why the construct definitions is so important. We're evaluating people's ability to candidates' ability to sustain an interaction on a familiar topic. We're defining the sort of context of their being evaluated on there. It's not technical, it's not going to be academic, it's not going to be scientific type of talks. But it has to be interactive, and that's what our main concern will be. The beginning consists of an exchange of personal, hi, how are you, tell me about yourself, so to get to know personal information, general kind of for both, and it's more or less 50% of the time the examiner is talking, and the other, if it's an interactive test, and the other 50% is the student talking. It's not like, now tell me about your life, and I will wait 3 minutes until you finish. It's really an interaction. Oh, really, that's interesting, and I've done that myself, but I never tried it. And they keep on talking about something more like sort of simulating a real life conversation. Like someone you just met on the bus and you start talking. Then there's the second segment of the test, the second part. Task 2 consists of you have a sample on your handout after page 8, I think. I don't know how they were stapled. In which the student gets a picture with the first box on the handout is what the student gets, the examinee gets, and they are presented with a situation. Suppose you might pretend that I'm your friend, or we are friends, or we're colleagues, or we kind of sort of set a situation there. Ask a few questions about this, and the questions are guided so that the examiner has some control over the information that's going to be exchanged. And all the examiners have the same information and the same control in a way over that information. And based on the information that the student elicits through questions, he has to get some information to be able to offer advice or to provide some feedback, how to solve a problem. After they discuss this situation for a few minutes, he will explain why he chose that solution, or why he offered that kind of advice, why he didn't offer the other type of advice, or what the other options were not chosen. And then they will continue talking, but it's more like 50% talking, examiner, examinee. It's not like, now you talk for 8 minutes. Examiner needs to guide in a way to make sure that he's being evaluated at up to the right level in a way. But it's not going to be a monologic type of 8-minute talk, 6-minute talk by himself, where he wouldn't know what to do, really. He will be asked at least 3 questions that might be progressively harder in a way, or that might require more elaboration, or more kind of inferences, or information from different sources. But it doesn't require any previous knowledge on any topic. It's common sense, general knowledge type of questions in general. So that will be one possible test, and that's one way of solving this, the task and the definition of a construct for this type of test. Well, this is one of the speaking prompts in which they get 2 pictures and a description of what they might be talking about. And the examiner will have additional information on a table in the examiner's manual with a series of elaboration questions that will be selected according to the candidate's background. And the examiner also can slightly adapt those questions to make sure that they are appropriate for that student. So you're not really talking about something, well, I'm supposed to be talking about this, so you have to talk about this. It's an exam, and it's really a sort of a natural conversation that it needs to be generated, and both have to be interested in that topic in a way. There is a variety of prompts that are developed for every exam, and that's in a way how the task design, how this is controlled. Any questions, or did that address your concern in a way? Well, the other example we work with is basically at a more advanced level, and it's the construct for this exam is to have spoken interaction that is similar in form to a natural conversation. The participants negotiate and explore a topic or topics of mutual interest. Again, both have to participate, but this exploration should approximate all the richness and depth typical of language use in non-test situations in kind of advanced levels and native speaker-like type of conversations. That's why this exam is used for other completely different purposes than the other one. So before going on with this, what kind of construct or goals could you have for your special student or a special group that you're thinking of in terms of a speaking test? Or not necessarily a test, but if you're interested in assessing their performance in a way, what are you thinking of? What kind of goal do you have in mind for them? How would you define the speaking task, the speaking test? How would you describe it very vaguely at the beginning, at least, at this stage, if you're going to do something with them next Monday? Any ideas? Yes.
What we usually do in the place where I work is to have reports on things they have previously told to read or to discuss. And they have like 2 or 3 minutes report in which we can have the opportunity to see the students' performance.
Okay. Any other ideas? What kind of speaking would that be? They did some research on a certain topic and then they present it to the class. So they have to talk about a certain topic for 2 or 3 minutes. Okay. Any other examples? No? Okay. So as we said, like moving on to the second one and another element, another stage in which we have to see how we can improve this transparency is how the tasks reflect those initial goals. We'll get into interaction and transactional uses of language. I don't know if that comes next in your handout. When selecting these tasks, we're back to page 4 now on your handouts. Depending on the different types of speaking, you have a chart adapted from Brown here in which you have different levels of speaking in a way and how they could be described and what kind of expectation you can have in terms of the speaking part and what kind of tasks would be appropriate to elicit that kind of language or that kind of oral proficiency. So depending on if you want a more interactive type of speaking, you will require interviews and role-plays discussions, conversations, games, but not monologues or not read-alouds or not a pronunciation type of activity. Or there are different levels here of speaking in a way, aiming at different goals, and the tasks have to reflect those needs. If it's more interactive, it will require the participation of 2 or more people. If it's these reports, those will be aiming at other kinds of speaking in a way. So we have to know what we are evaluating from the beginning, obviously. Another aspect related to the tasks and how we can improve is how we can improve the impact that our tests can have on their performance. And there are different things to consider in that sense, not just using, testing the abilities whose development we want to encourage, really. If we want to test their interaction, we have to provide an interactive task. It cannot be a pronunciation task or a reading aloud task or a monologue task. Using a variety of samples, not just using one single 5-minute test or activity to evaluate their performance. The more samples we use of their performance, it's like having many photographs of their performance over a certain period of time. The more accurate the information will be for our evaluations and for the decisions we have to make. While basing this on the objectives, all these are related to the information we're already sharing so far. In terms of more interactive communicative tasks, they have to elicit speech that has a purpose, extended chunks of speech. You were referring to that about the last task for the ECC, more discourse level type of activities in which they have to organize their ideas. It's thinking beyond single words or how to produce isolated sentences and structure organized speech. And this task that we were just describing shows this kind of structured, organized type of progression of speech in which they talk about their personal information first and they know how they're going to be evaluated from the beginning. They are prepared for this. But these 3 tasks for this type of speaking test reflect what we can do in a normal class in every country of the world, really. We also control the input for those purposes. Copy behavior refers to different principles for teaching and testing in a way, speaking at beginning and intermediate and advanced levels. The references is in the back of the handout. But for intermediate levels in particular, she suggests to plan speaking tasks that involve negotiation for meeting, which both need some sort of information. The other one has, I don't have it and I need that information and I have to negotiate to obtain that information. And he needs something from me at the same time. Like information gap activities are perfect for that, but there are many instances in which role plays, scenarios, different types of activities in which we can simulate those real life needs. Designing both transactional and interactional speaking activities. Using English for social purposes or when you just meet someone and you have to talk to him for 5-10 minutes and you're not going to get a job because of that or nothing is going to happen with that conversation. The kind of language that you use for those purposes is different from the kind of language you use for more transactional purposes. You need to do research, you need to investigate into certain topics, you need to obtain information for your job, you're calling a customer and you need to talk on the phone and obtain certain numbers, certain dates, certain very precise information for different purposes. The relevance of both speaking tasks will be completely different in those 2 senses. And whenever possible, personalizing speaking activities. So the tasks and materials to use for intermediate level that she recommends are role plays, picture-based activities, logic puzzles, information gap, jigsaw activities. For more advanced learners, well, you have all the information there, but working on both fluency and accuracy and encouraging them to take reasonable risks in speaking English and providing opportunities for them to notice the gaps between their actual performance and the more desired performance, how they would like to improve that performance, and be able to self-correct. And then she recommends a series of other kinds of activities which are more like extemporaneous speaking and improvisations. So you have a list of different speaking tasks to use for different purposes. You might have used some of those, none of those. Is there any of them that you're not that familiar with? And the next one clarifies at least 3 of them. In a role play, there can be just the roles are assigned, they know from their background information, living in general, they know what a waiter is supposed to be doing and a customer is supposed to do after working on a restaurant unit, they know what to do. In an improvisation, you just give them a situation and they have to improvise what they would say in those situations, and they have 2-3 minutes, they're going to be speaking for 2-3 minutes only. In a scenario, for example, there are 2-3 different people participating in the activity. Each of them has shared information about the situation in general that all of them know about, but each of them has pieces of information that only they know. So they're going to be working, each of them will get these 3 cards, but the others are not. They are all working on a restaurant, they're all related to restaurant type of activities. There are three groups. You give one situation to group A, another, the B situation to group B, and C situation to group C. They discuss as a group how to address this issue only as group A, only as group B, and only as group C. And then they send one person to the front with the background and the discussion that they did and how to prepare in a way, like how sort of rehearse and prepare, activate their background information and strategies to work with that situation in particular. So they have part of the situation they will know how to respond to. But once they get here, only one person will be here, and people from their groups can come and make suggestions on how to respond to certain things. Once they get here, they will see that some things will happen in the way they expected and predicted, but some others will not be expected. And they will have to deal with sort of unexpected problems in the situation that they were prepared for. So it's, in a way, helping them develop more strategic competence to be able to perform appropriately in everyday conversations in which you can partially prepare for, but there will be many unexpected events. So that's another possible type of activity. Have you ever used scenarios in your classes? Very fun. So some tips for teachers who are developing oral assessments in general. And so far we've been working with the definition of a construct and the goals of a test, and then selecting then the tasks that more appropriately reflect those goals. Plans all these tests, obviously, as you would plan any class. It's not something that you can improvise and see, let's see what happens with this. They will be between 15, 30 minutes, 10 minutes minimum. Offer as many first starts as possible. More than one format to speak, to perform in different ways. Different learning styles, different people will benefit from different possibilities. Use more than one evaluator, interviewers. You can use all students as evaluators in a way in a class, and then you can train them to use rubrics and to evaluate their own performance and other people's performance if they can follow certain checklists. We'll see those in a minute. How much time do we have? What time will we finish? 4:45. Okay. So we have like half an hour. Yeah, the interviewers. And it's very important to check how we're going to perform this, especially if it's a high-stakes test. There cannot be any room in the back, or people interfering and coming in and out, or phones ringing. If you're evaluating people for very formal tests, and there are important consequences based on the results of those tests. The conditions how those students are tested are really important, and we have to take care of all of those. So we'll do that as soon as we move on. But keep thinking about the group, one student, one assessment task that you would need in terms of oral evaluation for a special group or for an individual student or for your school in a way. And we'll do something as soon as we get into the other level. So the third component of this triangle we were developing from the beginning, the construct on top, the tasks, and the rubrics, all three have to be very well interrelated to make sense, to offer transparent testing opportunities for students. And rubrics, I guess everybody's familiar with those, and scoring rubrics and descriptors and how we're going to evaluate them, and to use rubrics for different assessment purposes. Yes? Hands? Like, familiar with them? Kind of criteria to evaluate their performance. They can be holistic or analytic rubrics. You have different samples taken from different sources in your handout. The first one on page 7 is a speaking checklist in a way. It's also a kind of rubric for students. They can use that for self-assessment. They can use it for peer assessment. The teacher can give them, we are assigning this project, there are going to be this report that they have to produce, and with the assignment you can give them a list of something like this. This is exactly what I expect. If you get all yes, if everything is okay according to this is the only thing I will check when I'm evaluating this. That is kind of transparent evaluations. From the beginning, from the moment they're preparing for those speaking tests, they know how they will be evaluated. And if you get all yeses here, you will get an A. If you get 80% of the yeses, you will get a B, and so on. If you don't get any of them, you will fail. If you get 3, the borderline to pass will be something. They have to know how they're going to be evaluated from the beginning, when they're preparing for the activity that they're going to design themselves. The other ones on page 8, well, there's a analytic rubric in a way that their performances, different behaviors are described there. There's a scale from 1 to 5 in which they can be evaluated. It's like another level compared to the previous one in which it's yes or no. It's more directly observed. If this happened, it's a yes, and if it didn't happen, it's a no. There is not much to think about in that case. In this other case, there is more subjectivity involved, and someone has to decide if it's how accurate was this response, or how appropriate was it, or how useful was it for beginning of a... Did he make use of eye contact? How much? Facial expressions and different gestures and body language. And who is going to evaluate that in a way? If it's a 1 to a 5. The other one, you have a more holistic scale on page 8 to rate a speaker's effectiveness or argumentation. So it's how a person, in relation to a single function in speaking, how that performance can be subdivided into different levels. So that can also help you in the initial definition of your construct. If you're mainly interested in evaluating this function, you need to have a very clear definition of the function and what it involves. What is a good performance in that function, and what is an average performance, the minimum expectation, and below average. The other ones, are you familiar with the Common European Framework and the 6 levels that they propose? There are 2 tables related to the CEF, and those are the A1 to C2 levels on pages 9 and 10. The one on page 10 is a more holistic global scale that describes all the levels. And the one on page 9 is a more analytic scale that describes different categories for each of the holistic levels. It's analyzed in terms of 5 different categories: the range, accuracy, fluency, interaction, and coherence. So these 2 are complementary in a way, and some teachers prefer to use a more holistic evaluation, and they need the overall picture, or like the forest, before looking at every little tree. And others need to add up the different trees to make sure that they have a forest, and they cannot be sure that they have a forest unless they can see the different components of that evaluation. And many rubrics propose both elements to be more transparent in a way, to be more effective for different kinds of evaluators, and to make it easier to understand for students, for examinees. The next ones, you have 2 more, like different levels, 3 more that show different. We have time to this. Look at this. I have the rubrics here now. probably have to share these ones. These are two sets. One page is an analytic scale and the other one is a holistic description. We will need two in pairs or in groups of three, so we can watch a video clip with an evaluation and we can decide how you would rate these people. Okay? So get into groups of three, 4, 2.
Yeah, this is one. This is the. This is the section. There you guys are. Yeah.
And do we have in different groups at least one, page 1 and page 2? These rubrics are in like work in progress. We're redefining these rubrics in a way to make them reflect what's going on in terms of evaluations nowadays. And after analyzing different videos, different performances from students, from examinees for the ECC level, this is a high intermediate test. Students might have taken around 400, no more than that, 500, for 500 hours of instruction, around an average of 500 to 600 hours of instruction. They're taking this test. So one thing we'll do first is to pay attention to the evaluator, both their performances, how their behaviors, how they interact in a way. Is this an interactive, or does this reflect the interaction that we were referring to earlier? Are they evaluating the candidate's ability to sustain the examinee's ability to interact on a familiar topic? Yes, no, why? What do you see there that reflects that construct definition? And once we talk about that, we will evaluate them according to the scales. You can use either page 1 or page 2, or a combination of both. Page 1 has the performance profiles. It's a task performance, in a way, how they accomplish the task as it is defined. It's how they use listening comprehension and how they perform on the overall part of the test. The other one analyzes each of the different components that are more detailed in a way, and are analyzing different elements of interaction. Okay? Muchas gracias.
My daughters love also pandas very much. We have some pandas, animals in the room. And I think it's only 40 you talk with them.
Yes, we can say it.
Yes. Then it's better to save pandas than leopards. To give money for pandas.
And what about why didn't you choose the leopard?
Why not? Because I feel it's more but more aggressive. I'm not sure, but I love better pandas. I prefer pandas.
Okay, so it's totally based from your heart.
Yes.
Your gut feeling.
Yes.
Okay. What about in real life? Do you think
for the life. I mean, it's very important to have the equivalence, we say. I'm not sure.
There is a kind of a balance.
Balance, that's right. Balance of the earth. And it's a big problem for people. We got, it's not only for animals, but also for us. We have to keep forests to try to save, to make a better life for us. We have pollution, we have it so big.
And we're losing our forests.
Yes, that's right. And it's not only we have the forest, but we have also fire, we have many problems. Then I think that the best thing is to keep what we have and then to protect.
Okay.
Yes.
And what about here in Greece? What animals do we have that need help? You may
yes, I know. There's bears.
Bears.
Yes.
You know anything what's being done?
People has fear for bears, and they want to protect their animals, the sheep, and they kill those animals, or they take to make money, to grow profit.
What can bears be used for? You know what? I don't know.
To the fairs.
To walk.
Yes.
Walking, dancing bears.
That's right, dancing bears.
Yes, yeah. And maybe you can give me some more advice on what we should do.
Can you tell me your idea? So, shall I start first?
Okay.
Okay, so what did you see in their behaviors and how they sustain interaction? Does this reflect the construct from the beginning? Yes, no? I don't know how familiar pandas might.
No, but it's a topic that a person at that level can talk about. She has a vocabulary, but we think it could be a B.
Yeah, before getting into the letter grade.
Yeah, because she was able to interact, and she needed some help from the interviewer, but just to clarify, provide certain words she'd like to.
So was this interactive in the way we discussed from the beginning? Were you expecting more participation of the examinee? Did you think that the interviewer participates too much? What is the kind of expectation you had compared to this?
I thought there would be more open questions. So I thought that at least one of the questions she poses was like, so you think, or do you think this, yes or no? Or I thought it would be more open. So I'm not sure if that's why the interaction was sometimes shorter.
I presume that the interviewer was trying maybe to rephrase a lot of the things or trying to make sure that she understood in a way what the interviewer was saying. Probably just to reassure the person so that the person wouldn't feel inhibited to continue talking. But I think that she overdid it to some extent because like Spencer said, I mean, like you don't find the initiative coming from the examinee, and I think that she had to push that a little bit more.
Any other comments or ideas? No? This is at the end of it was this situation that they were using, whether to provide funds to save some leopards or pandas, and again, we don't have to be experts in any of them, and who is going to survive and who's not. Will be another one, but we'll talk about this in a minute. And so it's explaining and supporting the opinion why she chose one over the other one, and talking a little more about it and using these other elaboration questions. They are not kind of explicitly stated as and here comes the next question. So now you finish with this one, and after 2-3 minutes, here comes the last question. So let's see how you do with that one. It is part of this interaction, and both are going to be participating. It's more, if it's not 50-50%, it's 60% of the candidates participating during the interaction and 40% of the interviewer participating in that interaction, which reflects normal, everyday interaction for everyday purposes, for real life purposes. It's not like one person and the other one just listening and nothing happens from the other side. And what about the grade? What did you think? How many think it would be an E? Before getting into either of them, which of the 2 pages did you use? Who used page 1, the profile, mostly? Okay, we have, raise your hands, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, around 10 people. And all the rest use page 2 mostly, like the analytic scale? Oh, really? Okay. What is this rating for you? We have B's, C's. Between C and D. Okay, why do you think that is so? That happens all the time. With you have 2 people interviewing, or even the same person doing the same interview again over a certain time. You need to recalibrate interviewers, and you need to make sure that what we are reading from here and reading on the rubrics, we all understand the same. So let's start with, I don't know, the maturity set B, a few C's. I heard, I think, 1 D and 1 A. Let's start with B, that it was kind of a majority in the group, and then let's see if we will move up or down. And I'm reading from page 1. Was she able to interact with some control of familiar topics, but may need assistance from the interlocutor when clarifying details or negotiating meaning? Did you see this? Our ideas are expressed clearly enough, though often in a general manner. It wasn't always what? Clear?
It wasn't always clear.
Like what? Do you remember?
When she was talking about the bears.
Because she's cute? They are cute? Or?
Yeah, and she really didn't know how to say what she wanted to say, it seemed to me.
I thought that would be more like she didn't know how to, she was looking for ideas, not language.
Well, I don't think she had the language to say what she wanted to say.
Okay. So our ideas are expressed clearly enough, though often in a general manner. Yes or no, partially, somehow. Interlocutor often has to help with the clear communication of details. She did participate. I don't think she needed to clarify much. It was mainly kind of, did you mean this? But it's not that she didn't understand. It's like making sure that it was following. Candidate has sufficient receptive skills for general comprehension, yet may have to negotiate understanding of some details in a spoken interaction. How was that? Awesome. Okay, I think. And on the other one, more analytic scale, what we observed, and the people in charge of this study observed analyzing the tape scripts, the scripts and the discourse used in the different countries with these tasks. First, there were different tasks. There are some tasks like these ones. These are more like traditional tasks that we were developing, and they have to offer advice. And there are others in which they have to, I'm your friend, and it's more like a role play situation with they have to pretend being something else. Here they are giving advice from their experience and what they think. In the other kind of situation, I'm your friend, my daughter has this problem, what would you advise me to do? Both types of tasks elicited the same amount of language or equivalent type of language. It's not like one is easier than the other one or the other one elicits a lot more language than the first one. In terms of reliability of those tasks, both were the same, right? Listening the same type of language. In terms of how the language levels that were elicited were described, and analyzing their discourse and the transcripts and watching the different videos and how many words they used for each purpose, in each task and so on, and the descriptions of the errors that they made. In terms of the analytic scale, the descriptions for elaboration and initiation in A and B were the same. A people or B people didn't differ in terms of how much they elaborated or initiated on a topic in each of the tasks, in each of the two possible tasks. So there was not a difference between those two levels. That's why you have the same descriptor for A and B as a shared category for both levels under the same category here. The same happened for fluidity of delivery and intelligibility. They were not different in terms of how fluent they were in their interaction here, in these two main top categories. They did differ in their linguistic resources, how well they used grammar and vocabulary, how wide a range of vocabulary they used, and how accurate and complex structures they used in this kind of high intermediate level exam. There were differences in the other, that's why these two are in the same, and they're not, they don't have two different descriptions for the first two levels. There are some shared elements in the bottom categories, but there are differences that can justify having different descriptors for each. And that's why here, in the different ways to develop scoring rubrics, there might be more intuitive methods or more empirical methods. In our case, we're working with the data from the exams and analyzing task performance and description and elaborating the descriptions for these rubrics, how to interpret their performance based on the performances we were observing so far. This one was a B+ person. The main differences in elaboration or initiation doesn't affect the A or B decision in a way, and it was like at the top of the B category for the description here. She has control of enough grammatical structures to produce clear and comprehensible utterances, at least with the information we can see from here. The interview was much longer. We didn't see the beginning, and we didn't see the second task, the full task. And I don't know if this was the end. It was a few minutes of a second and third tasks here. So we don't have all the information to evaluate that person. But she had enough control of grammatical structures to produce clear and comprehensible utterances. Longer utterances in particular is maintained. And she has adequate control of vocabulary, uses implicit correction of vocabulary, given she did self-correct once, I think, during the conversation. I don't know if we have time for another one.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
How do you figure in, for example, like an English teacher, I think once you're around people who are learning English for a long time, you begin to understand them, whereas someone that wasn't a teacher couldn't. Right. So how do you handle that in the exam? You know what I mean? That like, I could understand just about anybody, but like a monolingual English speaker might not.
Yes, Spanish speaker, English teacher, evaluating a Spanish speaker student, making...
Yeah. Or just a native speaker of English teacher compared to just a native speaker of English who wasn't a teacher, like on the street, like out in somebody's friend.
There's nothing special here that we're doing about that. We're working with different training materials for the different centers, and it's in a way interpreted locally how they are training the materials. But that's why we do certain quality control instances with centers to make sure that we're reading here, we're reading the same. And we record some interviews that we request, and we also do those evaluations. We don't see the people, we just listen to those interviews and the interlocutors and see our evaluations for those purposes. If we find any discrepancies, Maybe if it's an A- or a B+ here, it's like borderline around the same levels. But if it's a D for one person or an A for another, Houston, we have a problem. And we have to go over with these videos or different kind of materials again and reading this. But why do you really think so? No, this is not such a big mistake, or it's not really affecting her communication, or she could express everything. Maybe she didn't agree on the opinions, and we're not judging opinions or ideas. It's basically how they are expressing those ideas. But we tend to be influenced on how the kind of interaction, how the content is handled, and that's why second interviewers or raters are important in that process too, so that they make sure that it's not just your personal interpretation of one. Right. Let's see another one and see how you would, just a few minutes, and see how you would rate that person. After going over with all these same information, it takes lots of time.
Don't have another option where excuse me.
I don't know where to get
the word from. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Really, I can't answer that question. But probably they don't, or they do it anyway. They shouldn't do it. You know?
Probably they don't mind the problem of the band.
Probably they don't mind about that. Have you ever seen leopards or pandas in real life? Never.
I never seen any. But I think pandas maybe have another solution, because maybe we can give there a place to live. But we didn't possibility of help both of them.
Right. Well, I was told that we have the possibility of helping only one.
Only one, because of the money.
Sure. And which one would you choose? It's hard.
How much money we need to save?
How much money do we have to save?
It's maintained. And she has adequate control of vocabulary, uses implicit correction of vocabulary, given she did self-correct once, I think, during the conversation. Let's, like we have time for another one.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
How do you figure in, for example, like an English teacher, I think once you're around people who are learning English for a long time, you begin to understand them, whereas someone that wasn't a teacher couldn't. Right. So how do you handle that in the exam? You know what I mean? That like, I could understand just about anybody, but like a monolingual English speaker might not.
Yes, Spanish speaker, English teacher, evaluating a Spanish speaker student, making...
Yeah. Or just a native speaker of English teacher compared to just a native speaker of English who wasn't a teacher, like on the street, like out in somebody's friend.
There's nothing special here that we're doing about that. We're working with different training materials for different centers, and it's in a way interpreted locally how they are training the materials. But that's why we do certain quality control instances with centers to make sure that we're reading here, we're reading the same. And we record some interviews that we request, and we also do those evaluations. We don't see the people, we just listen to those interviews and the interlocutors and see our evaluations for those purposes. If we find any discrepancies, maybe if it's an A- or a B+ here, it's like borderline around the same levels. But if it's a D for one person or an A for another, Houston, we have a problem. And we have to go over with these videos or different kind of materials, again, and reading this, but why do you really think so? No, this is not such a big mistake, or it's not really affecting her communication, or she could express everything. Maybe she didn't agree on the opinions, and we're not judging opinions or ideas. It's basically how they're expressing those ideas. But we tend to be influenced on how the kind of interaction, how the content is handled, and that's why second interviewers or raters are important in that process too, so that they make sure that it's not just your personal interpretation of one. Right. Let's see another one and see how you would, just a few minutes, and see how you would rate that person. After going over with all these same information, it takes lots of time.
Don't have another option where excuse me.
No, where to get the work from?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. Really, I can't answer that question. But probably they don't, or they do it anyway. They shouldn't do it, you know.
Probably they don't mind the problem of the partner.
Probably they don't mind about that. Have you ever seen leopards or pandas in real life? Never.
I never seen any. But I think that pandas maybe have another solution, because maybe we can give there a place to live. But we didn't possibility of help both of them.
Right. Well, I was told that we have the possibility of helping only one.
Only one, because of the money.
Sure.